and welcome back to another episode of The Greatest Show in the Galaxy, the show where I, the curator, discuss my personal favorite show of all time, personal favorite franchise of all time, Doctor Who. And today we'll be continuing the theme of every month having a different theme for it. We had a month mainly focused around the Doctor, we had another month mainly focusing around the companions, and we even managed to squeeze in a little episode concerning the TARDISes in the middle of all that. Now, this month will be all about the Daleks, the most iconic characters in the show, aside from maybe the Doctor, the TARDIS, or any of the companions. They're easily one of the most recognizable parts about Doctor Who, and quite possibly one of the most recognizable aliens from all of sci-fi and pop culture in general. However, before we get down to that, there's a couple of things I want to highlight first. As you all know, on the show, I like to highlight certain people on their birthdays, specifically people who are involved with the production of Doctor Who. And since the last episode was recorded quite some time away from the pre-recording of this episode, the birthdays we'll be talking about today kind of feel like they should have been in last week's episode, but they weren't. So before we get down to the first episode, the first birthday I'd like to highlight today, I wanted to point out that this is meant to be a fun and sometimes educational show about Doctor Who. And so one of the things that I will not stand for is toxic fandom. I do not promote toxicity in any way, shape, or form. I do not like to promote toxic behavior. Obviously, as you may know, I do have some issues with certain characters involved with the show, but that is just the characters themselves. I do not personally attack the actors involved with the characters. I do not personally go after the writers who wrote those characters. I don't do any of that. And I know some people on the internet do, and it's fine if you want to go that path, but I will not stand for it in this show. So if you have any negative feelings towards any certain character or actor or just person involved with the production of Doctor Who, I highly suggest you take those elsewhere. There's plenty of other platforms for you to do so. That being said, on March 1st, about a week and a half ago, was the birthday of one Mr. Chris Chibnall, the current showrunner of Doctor Who. He's been the showrunner for the entirety of the Jodie Whittaker era of the Doctor, and his run will come to an end later this year with Jodie Whittaker's final episode. And yes, while you may have some thoughts and opinions regarding his run as Doctor Who showrunner, while you may not be happy with some of the choices he took as the showrunner, again, we are here to celebrate his birthday. A couple of days too late, but that's beside the point. We're here to celebrate this man's birthday, and we will not be delving into the realm of toxic fandom. So yes, happy belated birthday, Mr. Chibnall. And the next person I would like to highlight is the late Mary Tam. For those of you who don't know, Mary Tam played the first incarnation of Romana during the original Tom Baker era. She was the introduction of the character of Romana. And Romana, by the way, was the very first Time Lord companion on the TV show. Obviously, some of you may point towards Susan, but for those of you who actually are well versed in Doctor Who lore, technically speaking, Susan was Gallifreyan, but she wasn't a Time Lord. There's a bit of a gray area there, but she was basically the first Gallifreyan since Susan to be a full-on companion on the show. And she was one of the very few companions that actually managed to match wits with the Doctor. She was one of the few people who could actually challenge the Doctor in his intelligence, and she was not afraid to speak her own mind and put the Doctor in his place when he needed to be put in his place. Sadly, she passed away in 2012, and she doesn't get to celebrate her own birthday today, but I would like to highlight it regardless nonetheless. Now, March 25th was the birthday of another person that we will be highlighting today, and quite possibly the biggest name on this week. Again, not to overshadow the lovely Miss Mary Tam, and not to overshadow Chris Chibnall, but this is quite possibly the biggest name out of the three. We have the one, the only, the late great Mr. Patrick Troughton, also known as the Second Doctor. He was the first person to take on the role of the Doctor since William Hartnell. He's the Doctor that essentially introduced the concept of regeneration into the show, and one could go so far as to say that the show wouldn't have lasted as long as it did if he didn't step into the role of the Doctor when he did, and continued the show despite the aging and worsening medical condition of the original actor. He also reprised his role in The Three Doctors, The Five Doctors, and The Two Doctors. So clearly he was not afraid to jump back into the role of the Doctor. He clearly loved this role that he helped popularize as much as he did. And to Mr. Chris Chibnall, Mary Tam, and Patrick Troughton, thank you, all three of you. We quite literally could not do this without you. Now, going back to the Daleks for a little bit. So in case you were thinking this was going to be a timeline type discussion of the Daleks, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I'm not going to do that. The Daleks have appeared since basically the very second serialized story of the show, and have continued to be a massive, massive thorn in the Doctor's side. They are easily the biggest and worst enemies that the Doctor has ever had to face, and as such, they have appeared in so many episodes, and most of which were out of order, that actually constructing a full-on timeline for these creatures and for these characters is a gargantuan task that I'm simply not feeling up to it. And also, aside from the episodes appearing out of order, a lot of big chunks of the Daleks' history was not televised. A lot of it comes from comic books and novels, and especially Big Finish audio plays. So, considering that in the very first week of every single month, I like to focus on just the classic era of the television show, the modern era of the television show in the second week, and then in the third week we would be jumping into some expanded media stuff. I couldn't quite possibly keep a fully functioning timeline for the Daleks with just talking about the classic era of the show. And if you're looking for a full-on, complete, and elaborate and very detailed timeline for the Daleks, some people have attempted this gargantuan task on YouTube in the past, such as the likes of The Who Addicts, Mr. TARDIS, and The Whovians. So I highly recommend, if that's what you're looking for, I highly recommend checking these guys out. These are the videos that they made. I will ask Soda to put a link to these videos in the description of this video. But what I will be attempting to do today is I'm going to go over every single appearance of the Daleks in the classic era of the show, and try to sort of construct a timeline of appearances for the Daleks on the classic era of the show. And like I mentioned, in a lot of the very early seasons of the show, the Daleks have appeared out of order, so there wasn't much of a continuity for the Daleks in the classic era. Later towards the Tom Baker era, I should say, they started to having a continuous timeline that we can actually explore. But we'll get to that when we get to that, because the first thing we have to talk about today is their very first appearance on the show, an episode simply known as The Daleks. It was originally called The Mutants, but then the serial was forced to change its name to The Daleks, because The Mutants was the title for a third Doctor story later in the show's timeline. So, and to be fair, I think just naming it The Daleks actually makes a lot more sense. So, following the adventure that the TARDIS crew had experienced in the first episode of the show, 100,000 BC, an episode we actually did cover on the very first episode of this show. They escaped to a dead planet. That was actually the very first name. That was actually the name of the first part of this 7 episode serial. And in this dead planet of Skaro, years and years into the future, the TARDIS crew have realized that the entire planet was dead. The vegetation had crumbled and turned into stone. All life was gone, except for an abandoned silver city somewhere out in the wilderness. The Doctor was very keen to explore it and actually engineered a clever way to trick his friends into going into the city, which is where they've been separated. And one of the companions, specifically Barbara, was approached by a mysterious unknown figure off screen, and that was actually the end of the very first part of this serial. Now, it was later revealed in the follow-up episode that they have landed in a city populated by creatures known as Daleks, and that was the very first time that the Doctor has ever met the Daleks in his own personal timeline. Later, it was revealed that it wasn't really the first time the Daleks have ever met the Doctor in their personal timeline, but like I said, a lot of these episodes were out of order, and so creating a full timeline for the Daleks is incredibly confusing and convoluted. Now, the Daleks revealed to the Doctor that the planet has survived a long neutronic war, which was then later renamed the 1,000-Year War between the Daleks and the Thals. The Thals are originally the main enemies of the Daleks, and the Daleks do believe that the Thals have somehow survived the bombardment of radiation all over the planet. The Daleks really need and rely on the radiation in order to survive, but they believed it was lethal to the Thals themselves. However, the Daleks also believed that the Thals have somehow developed a sort of anti-radiation drug to keep them alive. The Daleks engineer a way for Susan to go back and retrieve one of those drugs for the Daleks to analyze, which they have discovered is actually poisonous to them. So they decide to re-bombard the planet with radiation. They tried several different methods, and they also tried to wipe out the Thals completely under the false guise of a peace treaty between the Daleks and the Thals. Obviously, this was revealed to be an ambush, as discovered by the Doctor and his friends. The Doctor and his friends managed to escape their cells, warn the Thals, but not before the Daleks exterminate the Thal leader. Realizing that the TARDIS crew can no longer go anywhere because a very vital piece of the TARDIS was left behind inside the city, the Doctor and friends organized the Thals to sort of take back their planet from the Daleks and re-enter the city. Lots of Thals died that day, but a vital virus was released into the air, killing all the Daleks. And as the Daleks, in their very final moment, turned to the Doctor for help and begged him to have mercy and help them, all the Doctor said was, I'm afraid that even if I wanted to, I don't know how. And so the Daleks perished in that event. Of course, later it was revealed that the Daleks weren't really dead. But like I said, watch any one of the videos that I highlighted today. I believe each one kind of gives off a different explanation as to why that happened. So yeah, that's why I don't really pretend to know exactly what was the reason for that. But yeah, the Doctor and friends leave the planet Skaro, believing that this would be the last time they see the Daleks, right up until the next season, and actually the second episode of the second season, the Dalek invasion of Earth. As the name suggests, yep, the Daleks have invaded Earth, but this time it's long into the past of the Daleks timeline. One thing that the Doctor and friends notice right away is that these Daleks actually look a little bit different. The base of them their base is a little taller, and they have these dish-like devices on their backs, or the back of their casing, I should say. This was mainly due to the fact that in the original story where the Daleks were introduced, the Daleks could only really traverse on the metallic surface of the city that they lived in, because they had to rely on absorbing static electricity from the floor itself. But using these discs, they were able to traverse any kind of terrain at all and used it to conquer all of planet Earth. Now, this is another 7-part serial that actually leads you to believe that the planet has been conquered by someone and certain robotic people were controlling the population. But right up until the very end of the first episode, that is when it's revealed that the ones that actually managed to conquer planet Earth was the Daleks. Of course, as you see here, a Dalek literally coming out of the water of the Thames, as the first cliffhanger of the first part of the episode. Now, in this episode, how the Daleks conquered the Earth would then later on became the sort of stand-in method for how the Daleks conquered planets, especially later in their timeline when their numbers have dwindled so much that they couldn't really quite go in with a full force and conquer a planet. What they did was they introduced a global-wide plague into the planet's atmosphere, in this case being Earth. They let a lot of huge number of the population die, and then bombard the planet with orbital strikes, leaving the population incredibly weak enough to send a full force of Daleks to conquer the planet. They then separated the population of the planet into two groups: the ones with high intelligence and the ones with low intelligence. The people with low intelligence then became slaves to work in the mines and dig. People with high intelligence became slaves, which the Daleks then nicknamed Robo-Men. It was later throughout the serial revealed that the Daleks' plan was to drill deep into the planet's core, remove the core, and replace it with a sort of engine-like device, and turn planet Earth into a planet-sized spaceship to travel across the galaxy and conquer planets with. The Doctor and friends managed to stop the Daleks by hacking into the Robo-Men's programming and making them turn on their Dalek masters, essentially leading a human revolution against the Daleks and driving out the Daleks from planet Earth. Now, the next time that we actually see the Daleks in the show was actually in the Space Museum, where a Dalek, an actual Dalek was used as an exhibit in a museum. As you can see here, the first Doctor, William Hartnell, climbed inside the Dalek casing to hide from pursuers in that episode. However, they didn't just leave that prop there for no reason, because at the end of that episode, there was a sort of post-credit scene which actually led directly into the next episode, The Chase, where at that point in the Daleks' timeline, they have fought and lost to the Doctor so many times that they have decided that it was time to take revenge on him. So they basically constructed their own time-traveling machine and started to chase the Doctor all through time. The Doctor and Barbara sort of got to see that happening on the newly acquired space-time visualizer that they got from the Space Museum, and that was how they got clued into the fact that the Daleks were on their trail. The Daleks very quickly found the TARDIS crew in their TARDIS and actually started to follow them. They chased them all throughout time and space to various different locations until finally reaching a final confrontation on the planet Mekanos, heavily populated by the Daleks' old-time enemies, the Mechanoids. Now, the Dalek-Mechanoid War is a subject that could actually fill an entire episode of this show, but I won't be getting into that today. All I can say is that the Daleks have been in a huge war with the Mechanoids. The Mechanoids are one of the very few races in the universe that actually can match the Daleks in both intelligence and firepower. And they were some of the biggest challenge that the Daleks ever had to face before they made the Doctor, of course. So the Doctor manages to manipulate the Daleks and the Mechanoids into a skirmish that sort of ends in a draw, where the remaining Daleks flee and leave the Mechanoids on their planet alone. In the confusion, however, The Doctor's two companions, Ian Chesterton and Barbara Wright, steal the Daleks' time ship and use it to go back to their timeline, or rather, to their time period, I should say, a couple of months after they left. They went back to London in the year 1965, leaving the Doctor for the last time. But in the confusion, a human pilot who was left behind on the planet Mechanos sort of stumbled into the TARDIS and stowed away as the brand new companion. That, of course, being Stephen Taylor. Now, the next time we actually get to see the Daleks is in what is still remains to this day the only episode of the show to not feature the Doctor or his companions entirely, and that is Mission to the Unknown, also known as Dalek Cutaway, or Dalek Cut Away for short. It's the only episode of the show mainly focusing on the Daleks themselves. Unfortunately, the entire episode itself is missing. It's one of the missing episodes, and it's the first time you actually get to talk about missing episodes of the show. During the 1970s, I believe, a lot of Doctor Who episodes were deemed were just recorded over because the BBC didn't have enough space to re-record new episodes or new shows or whatever, so they just recorded all over the tapes of the episodes. Now, obviously, some episodes didn't survive for other reasons, because mainly they burned in a great fire that happened in the BBC archives. So yeah, there's two separate reasons for why some episodes are missing, but this is one of those episodes. Mission to the Unknown is still to this day missing, but I believe it has been sort of reenacted by some film school students. So I highly recommend checking that out. They kind of try to stay as close to the original episode as possible. But basically, in this episode, it's mainly used as a prelude, a precursor, I should say, to the next episode we are going to talk about. But in this episode, it's revealed that the Daleks have created a sort of an alliance with various other aliens from various other galaxies all over the universe, and created a sort of council of evil for themselves. And they're enacting what would then later be called the Daleks' master plan. They were contributing to a shared goal of creating a device so powerful it would make all of them masters of time. Here we can see some of the people that they align themselves with, standing right next to Verity Lambert, which I believe that was her final episode of the show ever. I think that this might have been the last episode of her as the showrunner before she left. We also in this episode get to see Varga plants, which are sort of vegetation from the planet Skaro, that if you actually accidentally get cut by one of their stingers, you will be infected with a venomous substance poisonous substance that will sort of drive you to be more evil and murderous and bloodthirsty until you eventually morph into a Varga plant yourself. But yeah, that was basically the main crux of the episode. In the episode, we mainly focus on a human ship that crash landed on the planet, trying to figure out what was taking place when they actually accidentally discover the Daleks. Now, the next episode actually takes place in ancient Greece, but the follow-up episode is still the biggest episode of Classic Who and one of the biggest episodes ever in the show, The Daleks' Master Plan, a serial mainly consisting of no less than 13 episodes. Technically 14 if you include Mission to the Unknown, but this is one of the biggest episodes that the show has ever done, and it shows. It really does show. We in the episode we go back to the planet Campbell, where the Daleks were first seen in Mission to the Unknown. We learned that the Daleks have perfected a device called the Time Destructor, which you can see here. The Doctor is holding right next to Stephen Taylor, and the new companion Katerina, and standing right beside him is actually Nicholas Courtney, not as the Brigadier. This was years before he was cast as the Brigadier. This is him as Brett Kingdom, I believe. I don't know, Brett. I don't remember the full name, but yeah, his name, the character's name was Brett, and the Doctor somehow managed to acquire the Time Destructor, as the all four of them also discovered that Marvick Chen, seeing in the picture right above here, Marvick Chen, guardian of the solar system and sort of ambassador to planet Earth, was actually in league with the Daleks and the other members of the Council, the Alliance, I should say. They then go immediately back to Earth to try to warn the people of Earth, but Marvick Chen got there first and put out a hit on both the Doctor and his friends, announcing them as enemies of planet Earth, and set out arguably one of his best soldiers of the Earth Protection Unit against them, Sarah Kingdom, who was actually Brett's brother, and she actually shoots him to killing him, firmly believing that he's a traitor to humanity. But then she actually accidentally goes unconscious as the TARDIS leaves, and the Doctor and Stephen managed to explain to her the situation. By the way, I forgot to mention, Katerina unfortunately dies earlier in the episode, the very first companion of the Doctor to die on screen. So it's very important to point that out. Regardless, the Doctor, Stephen, and Sarah then travel with the Time Destructor in the TARDIS. They try to avoid the Daleks. They go to all sorts of places all around time and space, trying to avoid the Daleks, until they eventually, unfortunately, are forced to return to Campbell and try to destroy the Time Destructor once and for all. The Doctor instructs Stephen and Sarah to stay in the TARDIS while he attempts to do so on the planet Campbell, taking out the Daleks and their friends, which the Daleks then proceed to exterminate once they believe they have outlived their usefulness. The Doctor activates the Time Destructor, but unfortunately Sarah decides to go help them, to ignore the Doctor's instructions and go try to save him, to her own demise. After activating the Time Destructor, the entire area surrounding the planet Campbell slowly starts to rapidly age. The planet itself goes into slowly starts to turn into a desolate wasteland. The Daleks begin to age rapidly, rust and fall apart and turn to dust. And the same thing happens to Sarah Kingdom. She slowly starts to age into a very, very old woman, and then eventually she turns into a skeleton, and her skeleton itself breaks apart and turns into dust. Only Stephen is safe inside the TARDIS, and the only one who manages to survive the effects of the Time Destructor is the Doctor himself, because of his Gallifreyan origins, and potentially, possibly because he's the timeless child, and so time really doesn't affect him. But we're not going to get into that at the moment. This was the final time we actually saw the Daleks in the William Hartnell era. It would be actually the follow-up season where we actually get to see the Daleks again in the aforementioned Patrick Troughton's first episode, The Power of the Daleks. This episode, I believe, all parts except one maybe are completely missing, but this episode actually did get a sort of reconstruction in animated form, so it's worth trying to find that. But yeah, in this episode, which actually takes place sometime years in the future, on the planet Vulcan, not to be confused with Vulcan from the Star Trek universe. That's a completely different planet named Vulcan. A colony of humans somehow stumbles on a buried spaceship which contains Dalek casings, which have seemingly been powered down and shut down for lack of power. One of the human scientists on the colony itself manages to get his hands on one of those Daleks, and believing it to be a sentient robot, he tries to mend it to where the Dalek itself then pretends to be a servant of humans, and he manages to fool the scientist into thinking that he's a servant, and that's how the scientist itself starts using that Dalek. Unbeknownst to the scientist himself, this Dalek is actually trying trying to siphon off power from the human colony to power up his spaceship, or rather the Dalek spaceship buried under the ground, to restart and recreate new Dalek soldiers. This was actually the highest number of Daleks seen on screen at that time of the show. But the Doctor manages to thwart him by making the power siphoning backfire on the Daleks, destroying every single one of the Daleks in the process. Now, the final episode of that season was The Evil of the Daleks, another mostly missing episode, although I believe some episodes of the serial have survived. A lot of it didn't. But in this episode, it's revealed that the Daleks have devised what will then be known as a time corridor technology, which allows them to sorry, I apologize. I've been talking for too long. But this new form of technology allowed the Daleks to travel between different time periods, specifically for this case, between 1966 and 18 something. I don't know. It's been a while since I've watched the episode, but it's basically between 1966 and the late 1800s, where the Daleks have managed to enlist the help of a human scientist to help them with their own experiments. Once they learn that the Doctor and Jamie are there, I should say, they kidnap the Doctor and force him to help them in their experiments. They drag him all the way back to the planet Skaro, where the Doctor, for the very first time, comes into contact with the Dalek Emperor on Skaro, using Jamie and Victoria Waterfield as hostages. The Emperor coerces the Doctor into discovering what they call what the Daleks nicknamed the human element, the thing that allows humans to survive while so many of their kind constantly gets destroyed by or constantly loses many as a result of the Doctor. The Doctor is reluctant to help the Daleks at first, but begrudgingly decides to do so. He develops a sort of human type element, which he introduces into 3 separate Daleks, nicknaming them Alpha, Beta, and Omega, I should say. And these 3 new Daleks actually develop sort of human-like personalities. They're very childish and friendly and curious and inquisitive, which does not really sit well with the rest of the Daleks. The Doctor realizes the potential that this new human Daleks have, I should say. So he reintroduces this new human element into a number of other Daleks, which then quickly descends into a revolution between these new humanized Daleks and the regular Daleks, which then turns into a very brief civil conflict between the Daleks, where the Emperor, where many Daleks, including the Emperor himself, get destroyed, along with the Dalek city on Skaro. The Doctor, Jamie, and Victoria manage to escape in the crossfire. Now, following this event, the Daleks have been mostly silent, mostly on a back bench for a very long time. One Dalek was actually seen in the last episode of Patrick Troughton's second season, The Space Wheel, but it was mainly just a clip from The Evil of the Daleks, which the Doctor used to show the new companion Zoe what the Daleks are. But other than that, the Daleks haven't really showed up until Patrick Troughton's final episode, The War Games, where once again they were shown a single Dalek was shown on screen alongside a Quark, a Cyberman, an Ice Warrior, and a Yeti, to show that the Doctor used this as an excuse to show the Time Lords the type of stuff that he's been, the type of monsters all throughout the universe that the Doctor was helping to stop. while the Time Lords have been sitting on their butts doing nothing, essentially, which the Doctor actually uses it as an excuse to plead his case, I should say, when he was put on trial by the Time Lords. And again, the Daleks then, again, we didn't have a full-on Dalek story for, I believe, 5 years since the Evil of the Daleks and the next Dalek story, which, believe it or not, that's not even the biggest break that the Daleks have took from television at that time. The next time we actually saw a Dalek of some kind was in the third Doctor story, The Mind of Evil, where the Doctor encountered a creature that used a person's biggest fears against them. And in this particular case, he used a number of different villains that the Doctor has helped stop in the past, namely a Zarbi, a War Machine, an Ice Warrior, just to name a few. But obviously, one of those images that were shown to the Doctor was a Dalek, while the chanting of exterminate, annihilate, destroy played in the background. The first full-on Dalek story since 1966 was in 1969. The very first Dalek story since 1967 came in the form of 1972's Day of the Daleks, which may or may not have inspired the name of the 50th anniversary special, Day of the Doctor. But in this episode, the Daleks, now with a brand new color scheme and a brand new form of hierarchy, used time travel technology again to sort of try to change the outcome of their first attempt at invasion of Earth in the Dalek invasion of Earth. In this episode, the Daleks tried to maintain their hold on the planet in an alternate timeline where where they helped to instigate the where they helped cause World War III and sort of took over all planet Earth as its masters. They've also aligned themselves with the dim-witted Ogrons, which apparently I don't have a picture for, but yeah, this was also the debut of a race called the Ogrons, which then went on to become the Daleks' biggest allies throughout that era of Doctor Who. They were incredibly stupid, which made it easy for the Daleks to control them. And here we see the Doctor and Joe Grant making contact with the human resistance that was fighting back against the Daleks. Eventually, the Doctor manages to get rid of the Daleks from this alternate timeline of planet Earth by bringing the Daleks back with him to his main timeline on planet Earth in the 1970s, and having the forces of UNIT take down the few Daleks that were able to break through the barrier. The next time we actually got to see the Daleks themselves in the show wasn't in the episode Frontier in Space. No image for that, apparently. But in the episode itself, they showed up right at the very end, and it's revealed that the Daleks, in league with the Ogrons and the Master, were behind a series of unprovoked attacks meant to stir up tension and sort of, forgive me for as I'm struggling to find the words, but it was mainly intended to cause a lot of distrust and discord between the two leading empires at the time, the Human Empire and the Draconian Empire, which the Daleks hoped would lead into war between those two powerful empires, where the Daleks could then swoop in and conquer both empires for the price of one. Once the Doctor started to then obviously it was revealed by the Master that the Daleks were behind these series of attacks all along, and realizing that their cover was now blown, the Daleks then took the Doctor prisoner, hoping to use him to their own gains. The Doctor manages to escape in his TARDIS, while the Daleks flee back to their main place of operations. while the Doctor manages to send a message back to the Time Lords, which directly leads into the next episode, Planet of the Daleks. Um, in this episode, it was then revealed that the Daleks themselves have been based in the planet Spyridon the entire time, and tried to analyze these Spyridonian people's natural invisibility power. Sorry, natural um, ability to be entirely invisible, to find a way to make themselves invisible as well, and implement the same thing to their own spaceships and war machines, so that they can conquer planets without ever being seen. They also attempted uh, to resurrect a massive army of Daleks hidden beneath the planet, which is actually the background picture of today's episode. I'll give you a bit of a look. But yeah, the Doctor managed to stop the Daleks from activating that massive army by flooding the entire cave with sort of fast freezing liquid, which kept the Daleks in frozen, suspended animation for hundreds of years. Obviously, the army itself was eventually recovered and resurrected by the Daleks later down the road in a novel that we're not here to discuss today. But this episode was also very notable for introducing uh, the Supreme Dalek for the very first time, and the idea of the Supreme Council of Daleks. So that's one of the many recognizable parts from the episode. The next time we saw the Daleks on screen was in an episode called Death to the Daleks, where the Daleks travel to the planet Exelon in an attempt to uh, to steal a certain power source from a sentient city located on the planet itself and use it as a weapon for themselves. Unfortunately, the entire planet, the main power source itself, was actually weakening them, making their weapons completely useless and their casings really weak, to the point where they could be easily destroyed by the planet's mutated inhabitants, the Exelons. During the episode itself, the supposedly weaponless Daleks were forced into an uneasy alliance with the Doctor and a series of humans who were on the planet there to try to work together and find the secrets of this sentient city. But obviously, being the Daleks never really planned to fully cooperate with the Doctor or any of the humans. They were simply there for their own personal agenda. Once revealed, the Doctor tricked the Daleks into the city to where they thought they would find the power source they've been waiting for, but the city itself fought back. The Daleks then tried to escape in their spaceship, but it was destroyed by the leader of the human colonists, as the city itself lost its power source and began to fall apart, to the Doctor's great sadness. Now, finally, after so many years of appearing sporadically and completely out of order, now we finally have a sort of timeline for the Daleks, beginning in the very first time they met the Fourth Doctor, or rather the very first Dalek story in the Fourth Doctor's tenure, Genesis of the Daleks. In this episode, the Time Lords sent the Doctor back to the planet Skaro in the very first years of the Daleks' creation, to the very last few days of the 1,000-year war between the Daleks and the Thals, which is where the Doctor came face to face with Davros for the very first time. In this episode, it was revealed that the Daleks' ancestors, the Khalids, who are actually the ones who have been fighting the war the entire time, had begun to mutate. Davros, and it's revealed also that Davros had planned to accelerate the Daleks' mutation forward and use them, and encase them in these battle-like, tank-like machines which then went on to become what the Daleks originally became. The Doctor tried multiple times to prevent the Daleks from developing the way they did, or destroy the Daleks once and for all, before coming to the realization that he does not have the right to destroy an entire species, leading into one of the most iconic moments of the original classic series as a whole. Does the Doctor have the right to destroy the Daleks, wipe out a whole intelligent species before they even have a chance to develop and maybe become good on their own? The Doctor, as obviously then decides not to go through with it and not to destroy the Daleks in that particular stage of their evolution, which inadvertently also slightly changes the Daleks' timeline in and of itself. But again, this will all be explained in a much more detailed way in the other videos that I mentioned earlier today. The episode itself ends with the Daleks turning on Davros, realizing that he is not what they called a pure Dalek. He's still half Khalid, so they supposedly exterminated him and left him for dead on the planet Skaro. As the Doctor leaves the planet while attempting to bury them in the domed bunker that Davros used to enact his mutative experiment, his genetic experiments, leaving the Daleks trapped there for centuries, making their ascension and rise to power not fully stopped, but just halted by a few centuries. Later in Tom Baker's penultimate season, in Destiny of the Daleks, it's revealed that the Daleks not only have eventually managed to escape, but they've then since been locked in a seemingly never-ending conflict with arguably one of their biggest enemies up to that point, and one of the just like the Mechanoids, one of the few alien species that can actually match wits and match the Daleks' intelligence, the Movellans. I apologize for the bad quality of the picture, but yeah, the Movellans and the Daleks have been locked in a very long time in a sort of stalemate type battle, with each side developing a battle computer to try to predict the other side's next move. However, since both battle computers were incredibly logical, neither the Daleks or the Movellans fired a single shot throughout the entirety of that war, because they kept trying to predict what the other one was going to do, and therefore neither side has actually acted at all throughout that entire time. Eventually, they ran into the Fourth Doctor again, who managed to convince the Movellans that the war will finally be over as soon as one side switches off the battle computer and tries to actually fight the war themselves. With the fourth Doctor and the second version of the second incarnation of Romana, with their help, they finally managed to bring an end to the war. And I apologize for saying it out of order, but during this time, the Daleks decided to do the unthinkable, which is actually resurrect Davros to try to use his intelligence and battle strategies to help them outthink the Movellans' battle computer. But as I mentioned, with the Doctor's help, they finally managed to bring an end to that side of the war, and Davros was taken prisoner by the local Movellans to stand trial for his crimes against the Movellans. Now, about 90 years later, we find the resurrection of the Daleks, the Fifth Doctor story, where it was revealed where it was revealed that about 90 years after the last time the Doctor has met the Movellans and the Daleks, the Movellans have developed a powerful virus that was lethal to the Daleks, which was sort of making the Daleks lose the war. Eventually, in time, the Daleks completely lost the war, with the Movellans coming out as the very clear victors. But in Resurrection of the Daleks used the time traveling corridor technology again to making a gateway into planet Earth in the 1980s, stealing certain people and cloning them, turning them into what they called Dalek agents to sort of help them in the war. Uh, the Daleks also attempted to reacquire Davros himself, and another part of their plan was to capture the Fifth Doctor and his companions and clone him, and then recondition his clones to travel back to Gallifrey and assassinate the members of the Gallifreyan High Council, to which they obviously they did not, which technically speaking would have caused the Time War itself to begin several centuries earlier. But obviously the Doctor was able to escape and managed to stop the Daleks' plans before that happened. He also very briefly considered the idea of putting Davros out of the way completely, essentially ridding the universe of any other plan he might conjure up. Now, something that would actually that's actually considered important for the story. During this time, the Davros refused to accept. Didn't want to go through the same thing that happened to him earlier in his timeline in Genesis of the Daleks, where the Daleks turned on him, and something happened to him again in Destiny of the Daleks. This time, he tried to manipulate the Daleks into trusting him and making them think that they need him in order to continue living. Now, this caused some discourse between the Daleks themselves. Some Daleks became loyal to Davros, but most of them didn't, and that actually was the main turning point, which sparked a Dalek civil war between Daleks who were loyal to Davros and Daleks who were loyal to the Supreme Emperor and the Supreme Dalek, which directly leads us into the next time we see the Daleks on screen in Revelation of the Daleks. In this episode, it's revealed that Davros had actually survived the judgment that he was put on in Resurrection of the Daleks, surviving mainly as a disembodied head in a machine, living on tranquil repose on the planet Necron. I believe that's the name of the planet. Don't quote me on that. But basically, in this episode, Davros had taken on the identity of the Great Healer. This is him in the disembodied head form. And Tranquil Repose itself was a glorified funeral parlor, which Davros helped to run and maintain, allowing for the burial of a lot of human corpses, only to be revealed later that he actually wasn't burying the human corpses, but rather turning them into Daleks in these new glass-made Dalek experimental tanks, where the bodies of the deceased humans were being turned into actual Daleks to join his army of Imperial Daleks to hopefully overthrow and take down the Daleks who were not loyal to him, but rather to the Emperor. That Davros then revealed that the disembodied head was just a hologram, a very good-looking hologram, if you don't mind me saying, but his real physical form was actually fully alive and well in the wheelchair-like support system that he's been using since his very first episode. It was but Davros's sort of business partner at the time saw him as a means to an end, and so she sent a mercenary to the planet to Tranquil Repose, I should say, to take him out, which was the revelation that, as I mentioned, this disembodied head thing wasn't the real thing, and the real proper Davros then showed up in his wheelchair life support system and took the mercenary out. However, some of the disgruntled workers of Tranquil Repose defied Davros by alerting his presence to a squad of the renegade Daleks that were not loyal to him, but rather to the Emperor. And so they showed up on the planet and exterminated the Imperial Daleks that were used as Davros's bodyguards and took Davros with them to stand trial on the planet Skaro. Some minor things that happen in between have taken place, but the next and final time we actually got to see the Daleks in the classic era of the show was in Remembrance of the Daleks, where Davros once again managed to escape, and this was actually the very height of the Dalek civil war between the renegade Daleks and the Imperial Daleks, where Davros even upped the ante by introducing the the special weapons Dalek, seen right there, standing in front of the TARDIS. That we see here the Imperial Daleks fighting the renegade Daleks, and in this episode, it's revealed that Davros and along with a team of Daleks traveled to Earth in the year 1963 in search of a powerful Time Lord weapon known as the Hand of Omega, which Davros planned to use in order to convert Skaro's sun into a source of unimaginable power that would fuel the Daleks' war machine and give the Daleks the ultimate power in the universe. However, unfortunately, the seventh. That's not unfortunately for him, I should say. The Seventh Doctor managed to get his hands on the Hand of Omega first and tampered with it a little bit, before allowing the Daleks to take it, the Imperial Daleks to capture it, and then he continued. He started taunting Davros, goading him to use the weapon himself, only to then discover that what the Doctor did to the weapon itself. I apologize. I've done too much talking for one day, but what the Doctor then did to the weapon itself caused the weapon to make Skaro's sun go supernova, destroying the planet Skaro in the process, and destroyed Davros' ship upon returning to it, which Davros, naturally enough, managed to escape by way of an escape pod. That this was by far and obviously then the Doctor then went on and disposed the remaining renegade Daleks on planet Earth, essentially ending the Dalek Civil War. This was by far the biggest act of aggression ever performed against the Daleks in their history, and it was performed by their biggest enemy ever, the Doctor, who is also a Time Lord, which then forced the Daleks to make peace between themselves. It forced Davros and the Dalek Emperor to join forces and retaliate by attacking the Doctor's homeworld of Gallifrey, by declaring war on the Time Lords, which then went on to become what is now known as the Last Great Time War. But that is a story for another time. And this brings an end to our sort of timeline of appearance discussion about the Daleks. Again, I apologize. It's been quite some time since I've revisited the classic era of the show. I remembered most of it, and as I mentioned, I took a lot of help from the Who Addicts, Mr. TARDIS, and the Whovians. I highly recommend checking out the videos that they've made. They really helped me formulate or really piece together the certain things that happened in every single one of the episodes I've mentioned today. I apologize if my breakdown of this timeline wasn't quite as detailed or maybe accurate or even well constructed as you may have expected. I'm doing this mainly off of memory, and I'm having a bit of a hard time piecing it together. I promise I'm going to make sure that the same thing cannot be said for the next week's episode of this show, where we'll be discussing the timeline of appearances for the modern era of the show. For the Daleks in the modern era of the show. But as I mentioned, that is a story for another time. This is really all I can say for now. I really hope you've enjoyed me talking about Daleks for about an hour. And if you're actually interested to see more of what I have to say about Doctor Who, but maybe about other stuff, I have my own YouTube channel called 50 Shades of Geek. I'm also here on this channel every either Sunday or Saturday, depending on which day works best for me and my friends on Northern Countdown. Me, myself, along with Ben, Rayner, and Soda, who were here last week on the first edition of Doctor Who Said It. I will also be on. Sorry, will have been by the time you watch this. I was already on Ben's Unwind show on his channel, Ben Multiverse of Geekdom. Sorry, Multiverse of actually, yeah, Multiverse of Geekdom or Geekness. I don't know. Multiverse of Geeks. Let's call it that. And yeah, I can be found in all sorts of other shows on this channel. We also have lots of other shows on this channel. Regardless, we have Modern Analytics. Sometimes when Double D has time to do so, we have you seen this with Daniel and Snark? We're currently taking a break for a little bit, but they will be back pretty soon. We also have the Squared Slice with the aforementioned Soda and Dustin, and that is all I can remember at the moment. But yeah, we have lots of fun making shows on this channel, and it would mean the world to us if you can subscribe and leave a comment on either one of our videos. That is all I can say for now. I really need to give my voice some time to rest, but I will see you guys next week when I talk about the Daleks in the modern era of the show. Until that happens, everybody, I'm afraid, my friends, the Daleks have won. Goodbye for now.